Hack. What's up, everybody? How's it going? My name's Mike. This is All Things Fish, and I hope you guys are having a great night. Do me a favor if you can. Let me know how the audio is right now. Working on fixing some software driver issues here on my side here. So let me know if you can hear everything okay. I think it's working all right. Let me make sure. If you guys could just drop me a comment quick, let me know if you can hear me okay. Audio is good. Geek Boy said I'll turn the mic down just a little bit. I know some people said last time they might have been picking up just a little feedback maybe. So if you start getting some heavy breathing sounds or anything, let me know and I'll fix it. Hope you're doing great. All kinds of people in the house tonight. Nice to see you guys. Thanks for stopping by. Scott Fishymon S is here. Geek Boy, howdy, howdy. Sean, I've been talking to Sean lately. I'm trying to get him up here, and we're gonna do a stream about Shelley's one of these nights, and I'll have Sean up here with me. Um, Speaking of guests, co-host type people, Priscilla will be hopefully joining us tonight. She's running a few minutes late, so it might just be me for now. And if there's anybody that wants to step up and talk about some common myths and misconceptions in the hobby, let me know because that'll be tonight's topic. We're going to talk about some things that people often think they know what's going on, but really it's just not quite accurate. Rico Stan, what's up, jerk? Hope you're having a good night, man. I've been busy lately, man. I've been kind of in and out of a couple of your guys' streams, but haven't been able to catch a ton of stream time. So I apologize about that, but I do greatly appreciate having you guys here tonight. Patty, hello. Hope you're doing all right. Fish guy Nick, nice to have you back. Edgar, Patrick, John Oliver from John Oliver's Guppies and Aquatics. What's up, man? Some cool if you like guppies and you like seeing unboxing videos and you want to get a little more insight into the import process, check out John Oliver Guppies and Aquatics. He's been releasing a bunch of new videos lately of some unboxing type stuff, and he's bringing in some super neat stuff, largely guppies. He's got some new food that I've never tried, so I might actually next time I get some guppies from him try some of that food that he's got. Who else we got? Mike from Mike's Aquatics and Things. How you doing, man? Rico, Stan, Mike, Patrick. All right, I think I'm temporarily caught up for right now, um, but we'll see. So the weather is the weather's getting better, which means that I'm doing a little bit more stuff outside. Hopefully, been working on cleaning up the yard a little bit, only for it to start raining on us a bunch lately. So my yard is a disaster. So I've got that project to take care of, and then of course, obviously, the fish room will happen eventually, hopefully. But we'll see right now. I was gone last week. I was a little bit busy last week, and then this past weekend, my wife and I actually went down to Omaha to play in a hockey tournament together. So that was a lot of fun. So I missed a bunch of you guys, but I'm back this week. So I'll be here this week. We're going to talk again, like I said, myths and misconceptions in the hobby. Next week, I'll have to find somebody to fill the slot because I will be on vacation. My wife and I are taking the kid down to Florida to play the whole Disney games. That should be a great time. John Cruz, Massachusetts is real. How you doing, brother? Thanks for stopping by. Fish guy Nick asked how we did in the tournament. It was kind of an interesting tournament. It was normally like most hockey tournaments, you create your own team and you take a team down there together with you. But it was called the Dex, so the Draft Exchange Tournament. So you registered for the tournament. They kind of ranked everybody by skill level, and then you drafted. So you had no idea who you're going down there to play with. So it was a pretty interesting experience. So if you guys are into hockey, playing hockey, my wife and I play the men's league together, and she plays most of the time, and I play when I can. But it was a good time. They're starting to. I think it's called the Beer League Players Association. They're starting to do like I think they're going to do like softball tournaments and stuff too. So that's pretty neat. Check them out on Facebook if you're into kind of the beer league sports scene. Dragon Lair said he's a happy camper. Brad Naylor for tonight for my woodworking projects. I borrowed my father-in-law's Brad Naylor to do our flooring, and it's instead of like the standard pneumatic one, it's actually just cordless, like 18-volt DeWalt. That thing was gold. So nice to not have hoses and everything running around the place. Super quiet. Pick it up, run around the house with it all you want. No problems. So that thing came in clutch. Sean didn't put proof of the vacation. I'll make it up to you. Like I said, I think how many subscribers are we at right now? Whoops. I think we're like 372 subscribers. So we'll see. Maybe we'll do a giveaway tonight. Maybe. We'll have to see about that. Priscilla said she's about ready. Take your time. We'll get going without you. That's okay. C Squared, what's up, Fish Fam? Thanks for joining in, C Squared, tonight. Tuning in from Massachusetts. The New Englanders are with us. The Massholes are in the house. Thanks for stopping by. Loria's here. Hey, Anthony. It dropped a link to my Get Gills store. So Get Gills, I'm all things fish on Get Gills. My Planet Tank, if you've been watching any of the videos I've been posting in the background, you see the Planet Tank is coming along, and I'm starting to trim stuff. So any of those trimmings are going to my Get Gills page. Again, that's all things fish on Get Gills. There's not a ton there right now, but we're getting there. Posting some swords and some stuff like that. So it's going to get better. I promise. It'll happen. Us. Hey, Tom's here. Tom from Skipper's Aquariums. What's up, man? Stop and by. Just wanted to say hi and drop the link. I work tomorrow. Awesome. Thanks for stopping by, Tom from Skippers. I appreciate it. All right. So if you haven't hit the thumbs up, looks like we got 21 people in here so far. If you could do me a favor and smash that thumbs up button, I would appreciate it. In the meantime, real quick, before I forget, I should go do this. And let's see here. Skip to Malu. Rico, I caught your stream the other day, and it's so Rico's part of the Fish Fam, but if you watch his streams, they're a little bit different. He doesn't so much talk about the fish side of things, but he gets to know the people of the Fish Fam. So he'll have all kinds of people like Grumpy Mike on there, Chattanooga Ed. I think he had Lefty on there one night, etc. And it's just kind of a one-on-one thing where you get to know a little bit about each person that kind of hangs out in the stream. So it's a pretty neat little environment kind of setup that he's got going on there. So make sure you just swing over to Rico Stan's channel and check him out. Again, I think Rico, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you do the variety chat with Chattanooga Ed on Mondays, and then you do kind of like your interview stream on a different night. But I might be mistaken. Just a second here. See if we can maybe round up a couple more people to join in on the fun. And Rico, it looks like you've got a volunteer to come up on your stream and do some chatting. So John from John Oliver's Guppies and Aquatics is a pretty good dude. I've talked to him. Like I said, I have some fish from him now, and I do plan on getting some more. Um, Soon, as soon as I gotta get some more tanks up and going. I gotta work on the basement. I've got all these tanks stacked up in a corner. I counted the other day. I've got 56 of them, which is way more than I really need or planned on having. Um, but I've got 56 now. Unfortunately, not many of them are set up just because I don't have the stand space, and lumber is so expensive. I was looking at the price of lumber, like a 2x6x8. I literally need 6 of them just to make a 4-foot stand into a 6-foot stand. Like a 2x6x8 is like $12, and that's a hard pill to swallow. I'm not used to spending that much. So that's a little steep. Might have to just bite the bullet and make it happen. But I do have, the family vacation stuff going on. So it's going to wait at least a few weeks before we start setting tanks up. There is stuff in the fish room that I can do, and that you'll see me working on, such as setting up the air loop. I know there's obviously a bunch of videos out there about how to set up an air loop in your fish room. But I am making a video like that so you can see how I built mine, why I did it the way I did, what I used, and we'll get there. Alishan, hey, what's shaking? Glad to have you. There's a smart guy there. Um, I know a couple things about breeding fish and stuff, but this guy here, um, Alishan, he knows what's up. 8x4 polycarbonate panels, $34. I haven't looked at the price on those. I think that's reasonable for cutting lids. You figure if an 8x4 foot panel, you cut that up into lids, you should be able to get quite a few out there. So I don't think 34 is too bad. But lumber prices are they're nuts. They're absolutely wild. Not excited about that. So anyway, myths and misconceptions. What are don't tell me that, Deborah. That's not what I want to hear. Deborah says lumber prices are only going to get higher. Um, I don't want that to happen, or I'm never going to get this thing done, and that's counterproductive. Scott from Third Coast Aquatics is in the house. What's up, brother? And I haven't checked out your website recently, but you may have posted some new stuff. So those of you that are into keeping art or just have some extra room on your wall, check out in the chat now. I'm dropping the link to Scott Henderson's Art Pal, and that's where you can see some stuff like this. This is his newest aquatic type piece, I believe, which is a blue bolt shrimp. And it's pretty awesome. I don't see Kevin Leong here tonight, but Kevin Leong actually, that was a print that he won when we did the Third Coast Aquatics giveaway. So some pretty cool stuff over there. Obviously, like a lot of wildlife, mostly black and white stuff, but it's all pretty awesome. So way to go, Scott. Check that stuff out. Super, super cheap. But yeah, so that's the thing. Like I said, he has beautiful art. He does. C squared. Metal racks seem to look better as lumber goes up. It does, and I like using wood racks because if I don't want it to be a fish rack anymore, I can reconfigure it and cut it and piece it back together to be whatever I want. A wood metal rack. I mean, it is what it is. There's some flexibility to it, but we'll see. Third Coast Aquatics, not yet. A major end this weekend. I think this is what I'll be posting. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. And 3, 2, 1.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good. Deborah Lewis, hello. And say hello to this co-host over here.
I'm late.
Mine.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. And you are rocking one of Jeremy's shirts tonight.
Yeah, I got like 4 of them
Where can we get those?
from Jeremy.
Oh,
That's sergeanttank.com.
right.
Wait, it's either Sergeant Tank or Sergeant Tanks. Let me look.
Right. I mean, just some people don't know who Jeremy is because he did take a break from YouTube for a while, and he's just getting fired back up.
I had this shirt's about to fall apart. I had it for like years.
All right, I'll do it.
Oh, there it is. It's sergeanttank.com.
Sergeanttank.com. Again, let's see what else he's got. So he's got all kinds of cool stuff.
I even have a towel. Does he still have the towels?
I don't see a towel. I see a poster.
He doesn't have the black and white anymore.
And you can get wearing a Sergeant Tank onesie if you want, I suppose. But so there's that. Check out Jeremy's stuff. Check out Jeremy on YouTube. Sergeant Tank on YouTube too. He's kind of been at it for a long time. Like I said, he did go take a little hiatus, but he's back in the game now. So Priscilla's rocking the Sergeant Tanks tee, and I've got a little Jeffro's action going on over here from our friend Jeffro and Phoebe over at Jeffro's Fish Keeping, and you can find him on Teespring.
You're ignoring somebody in chat.
Who now? I don't know. It wasn't scrolling for a minute. Sorry.
Fishymon says, Priscilla, hi. Can you say hi to ATF? I'm invisible to him.
Fishymon, I said you were the second person that I said hi to because you were the second person in chat tonight. So I promise I said hi to you. If not, hi again. Check out Fishymon64. Third Coast. Hey. Just something there. Anyway. Nicholas Gonzalez. What's up, man? Hey, Nick.
Rico Stan wants a onesie.
Rico, I will buy you a onesie if you will live stream in it. I will have it shipped to your house and live stream in it. We'll make it happen. All right. So anyway, topic of the stream. So working at a fish store, I bet you get a lot of people that come in and they have a lot of these ideas in their head that they've heard of or that they've seen on the internet. It's like these myths, ideas, misconceptions that so many people seem to think are right, but are really just like out in left field and have no relevance to everything. Is that pretty safe to say?
Pretty much so. Like the biggest misconception at the fish store is, so I have so many inches of fish.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And then I'm like, so would you put a 10-inch Oscar in a 10-gallon tank? And they go like, right. No. I'm like, okay.
So we'll start with that one. So the inch per gallon rule. How many of you guys in the chat? There's 23 of you there. Thanks, all 23 of you. And if you're watching the replay, thanks for catching the replay. But how many of people in the chat have heard people bring up the inch per gallon rule when talking about stocking fish?
I hear it at least once a day.
Oh, I bet. And so maybe chat's lagging. Maybe people are just not interested. That's okay, Fishymon. But a lot of people think the inch per gallon. So somewhere forever and ever ago, far before my time, people decided that the standard method of acceptable stocking for a fish tank was an inch of fish per gallon of water volume, which is absolutely insane. Because as Priscilla mentioned, so if you look at like let's say an Endler, so an Endler is roughly, we'll say, an inch long when it's adult. Obviously, you can get away with more than 10 adult Endlers in a 10-gallon tank. However, you would not put an Oscar that's 10 inches long in a 10-gallon tank, nor does that idea even attempt to take into consideration the actual footprint of that tank. Because certain fish that are active swimmers like rainbows aren't going to do well. You might have a tank that's 2 feet wide and 10 inches front to back and 4 feet tall, and it might be, well, that's probably, 36, 40 gallons. But rainbow fish would hate their lives in there because they couldn't swim. So those are a couple examples of the inch per gallon nonsense. And John Oliver, Guppies and Aquatics, brought up that it happens a lot in the guppy world. And I was actually listening to, there was a club, I'm not going to mention any names, I'm not going to mention club names. There was a club that had a speaker give a presentation that was actually the editor of a Live Bearer publication, and he was an older gentleman, and he actually suggested using the inch per gallon rule. And when he opened with that, I was like, well, this guy might have nice fish and he might keep nice fish. The fact that he promoted like the inch per gallon idea when it came to stocking, kind of really like his credibility went down. Like I was like, I kind of lost interest in, because if somebody believes that, then maybe they believe some other wonky stuff. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the inch per gallon rule. Tony Danford mainly applies for nano fish. Yeah, it doesn't factor into account fish activity, tank size, like the actual footprint of a tank, etc. C squared remembers when the inch per gallon rule was the standard rule, and yeah, I mean I've been keeping tanks for almost 20 years now, and that's not a long time by any means, and it even back then, like people still talked about it. That was like the early 2000s when I started keeping tanks, and I think that rule started back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, or whatever. And Sean said he's heard local fish store owners talk about that, and that's kind of that. Nothing against the old timers, but I think that's an old timer mentality.
It's a 90s thing, basically,
and a bad habit.
Yeah.
So, Fish Guy Nick, it's just it is outdated with all the information. Back then, where forever ago, when the type of fish and the amount of species in the hobby was more limited, maybe when all you had was guppies, that could be an okay. But Scott said if that were the case, he'd be getting red-tailed cats like crazy. No kidding. You wouldn't. I mean, a red-tailed cat, you figure, okay, 36-inch fish, 36-gallon tank, right?
40 gallon.
40 gallon. 40
Yes.
40 breeder is sufficient then,
40
right?
breeder. Yeah. No, so
Right.
how would you explain to somebody that's getting into the hobby that this rule doesn't really apply?
Yeah, I would just, I mean, there's a lot of examples, like you said, like you can go with the Oscar, you can go with the red-tailed catfish, you can go with smaller fish. There's a lot of options just to give them examples. And you could even, like, if somebody came into the store and they're like, okay, I heard this, I want to stock my tank, I want to use the inch per gallon rule, whatever. You could walk over to a tank with like a Pictus catfish, and be like, okay, look how much this fish swims. Do you want to put this fish in a 10-gallon tank where it's just literally bouncing off the walls?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And Deborah Sanders and I believe someone else, C squared, both mentioned. So how many people have heard fish will only grow as big as their tank allows?
I hear that all the time.
Because that's another one, and to an extent, sometimes sure, like you can definitely stunt a fish's growth by keeping it in an environment that's too small, and there's a lot of factors that go into that other than it just physically being too small. One of the things that people don't consider is, especially when it comes to water changes, is there's hormones that are released that build up in the water, and it'll actually restrict that fish's growth from a biochemical point of view, but not in a healthy way by any means.
Yeah, so for example, I have about a 30-inch iridescent shark at the store that was in a 40 breeder.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got surrendered to the store because he outgrew the tank.
So somebody actually had a fish that big in a 40 breeder?
At a big box store.
I mean, I'm trying to think of how, because I mean, the fish obviously couldn't turn around. Like it just sat there.
And the fish has a lot of scars too.
Oh, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And that's like, even so, like if you look at like bala sharks, A lot of the times, and sometimes you'll notice this with rainbows too, not as often, but ball sharks, that their noses will be all kind of sore and torn up, just because they are super active fish. They're very fast. And even in a large tank, they'll just constantly bump into the glass.
I don't know if you saw it, but we got Jay Wilson in the chat. I told
What's
him to come look at my mic
up? Check out that mic.
because it has a CJ sticker on it.
CK. So, Jay Wilson, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate it. I think I've seen you in here once or twice before, but thanks for joining us tonight. Definitely much appreciated. Hope you're doing well. And for those people that might not be familiar with Jay, what's Jay's purpose in life? What does he do?
Oh, Jay has a lot of purposes. I think his newest purpose is he has a TikTok. You should go check it out.
Jay Wilson has a TikTok?
No, but he used to work for different companies. Now he works for CJ, which is an Italian brand that makes filters, pumps, a bunch of amazing stuff. And he's one of their representatives. And
Awesome.
he keeps a bunch of cool stuff too. He has
Oh, yeah.
Africans, vivariums with frogs and stuff.
Okay, cool. And does he post like that stuff on like Instagram or anywhere that you can see it?
I'm not sure if he's on Instagram, but he has a YouTube channel, Jay
Okay.
Wilson, where I think he live streams weekly now too, unless he's traveling or something.
Okay. So
Jay used to work for Fritz. Somebody asked, isn't Jay from Fritz? He used to work for Fritz. Now he works for CJ.
So I am subscribed. So I will drop his channel in the chat. I'm sure somebody already did, but there it is. Danny West, she asked what we're talking about. We're talking about right now. We're talking about poor methods that people rules of thumb that people use to stock fish tanks. So inch per gallon nonsense, etc. It looks like Fish Guy Nick got to him about that. Aristotle 760, what's up? And another idea that I'm not big into large fish in tanks, but another idea I've heard is that as far as tank dimensions, that you should have depth from front to back of at least twice the fish's size to give it room to turn around. Is that something that you've heard, or is that something that you would suggest?
I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. Depends on the fish. Like some fish are more active swimmer than others.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like a goldfish, fancy goldfish that kind of has a hard time swimming probably doesn't mind.
Right.
Have a tank that's only twice its length. But then like something like a bala shark that is an active swimmer needs a much, much bigger tank.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those rules are crap. Because at the end of the day, it really depends on what you're going to keep.
Right. Yep. So Alishan said the large spot per tilapia is bleaker eye. Fact, the true bleaker eye has never been in the hobby. The large spot species is pollini. The small spot species and DAPA are undescribed per Doc PVL. So I'm going to go take a look on the old Google machine. I'm familiar with pollini. I think is, the one that most people see in the hobby. Let me see if
you mean the Starry Night cichlid? Yeah.
Yep. So that's pollini that everybody's probably familiar with. Species and DAPA, Paradilapa and
I'm about to draw one of those. Kenny sent me a pretty good picture.
Really? And DAPA? Okay, so large spot versus small spot. Interesting.
You should ask Kenny up here. He can explain that perfectly.
Kenny?
He argues with people about that.
I don't know what Kenny's up to tonight. Patrick knows what's up though. All right. My monster shell dwellers in 280. It'll just die when it gets too big for it. There you go. So Fish Guy Nick brought one up. Just because the water is clear doesn't mean it is clean. Also, just because the water is turbid or stained doesn't mean that the water is dirty. So obviously, a lot of the stuff that we test for in the tank, we can't see with our eyeballs, right? Like you can't just see nitrates in the water. So your water might be crystal clear. You might have, a ton of very fine filter media that keeps the water crystal clear. And you may have, you might be on this hardcore regime where you replace your activated carbon like once every 2 weeks and it keeps any stain out of the water. But it could definitely be like you can't see ammonia. I mean, if a tank is cycling, generally speaking, you might see cloudiness but that's the result of more so the bacteria blooming than the ammonia itself. Just because your water's clear doesn't mean it's clean or healthy at all, and that's 100% there, Nick.
But usually you can smell ammonia.
Yeah. So if your fish tank has, obviously like most tanks, if you get close to the tank, it has a little smell. It shouldn't be like an in-your-face smell. So, Crowntail Half Moon, hiya, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Danny, old way of taking everything out of the tank and bleaching it twice a year. So I don't know if Tom from Skippers is still here, but Tom said when he was younger, he used to, when he cleaned his tank, he literally just took everything out. And like you said, Danny, that's that was some people's way of thinking. Some people, I think, still follow that. And I remember when I first got in to the hobby, I mean, I really wasn't into the hobby. My dad kept the tanks, but he kind of would every now and then he'd like take everything out and like rinse it off. And now that I'm educated and know better, I know the actual science behind some of that stuff. And we'll get into that.
Like I have, usually if I help somebody set up their first tank, they always ask, how do I clean the tank? Where do I put the fish?
Mm-hmm.
That's usually like the standard question.
Okay.
And like, you don't put the fish anywhere, right. Just leave them in there.
Right. Hey, George, what's happening, man? Aqua Balls is here. Tony Dansford is in the house. Vinoxky, howdy.
And yet, Danny says there's no such thing as clean. Clean equals bad news, which I can agree to a certain extent. If a tank is kept really, really sterile for a long period of time, those fish will be more prone to catch an illness. Then, I mean, it's kind of like us when our parents let us play in the dirt and we eat dirt,
Right. So, yeah, and that's just, I mean, and we'll get into I have a couple other things, queued up on deck here too. So C Squared asked, any idea if it's true that when the growth is stunted due to tank size, the fish's organs are still growing, which is what leads to their health issues? Now, I personally haven't dissected a fish itself to be able to like, yep, the organ's still growing. I would say from a, my own thinking in my head, if a fish is growing, then generally speaking, everything about that fish is growing. It's not like the skin or the skeleton stops growing, but the organs keep growing. So I'd say that's not particularly what leads to health issues. I'd be curious about that, and maybe that might be a question so I'll take a note of that to get details on that. But Stephen, the biologist, would probably be a good person. He is, kind of the fish vet type.
Oh, this chat is great. Fisherman says he still eats dirt. And then George Aquaball says he got crabs.
So Scott mentioned another myth pertaining to lighting was you need 3 to 5 watts per gallon for proper growth. And so actually, when I got into planted tanks in the early 2000s, I remember this being fairly prevalent. And we'll get into, the quick and dirty of why we now know it isn't correct. But before PAR was around, so PAR is photosynthetically active radiation, which is more or less the amount of energy that a light produces that a plant or a coral can use for photosynthesis and related processes. But before PAR was a thing, people roughly used watts per gallon, largely because the only lighting that we really had was either metal halides or like a fluorescent type, whether it's like a T8, a T5 high output compact fluorescent. So you'd use watts per gallon, and if you had 4 watts per gallon, regardless of whatever tank size it was, like I set up a 75-gallon tank, I had a 4 by 54 watt T5 high output light, so I was running 216 watts of light. It was considered high lighting because I had 4 watts per gallon. However, we now know that you could have, like I said, 4 watts per gallon, but if it's a really tall tank, we know now that as light, the more water that light has to travel through, the less active radiation that reaches the plants on the substrate. So what the things that come into consideration are the actual height of the tank, or the depth of the tank, how far the light is above the tank itself, because you'll see sometimes, depending on the manufacturer, you'll see lighting measurements as PAR. A manufacturer may post PAR, and it's like, oh, well, it has 400 PAR at 24 inches, but they don't tell you that measurement was taken through air, not necessarily through water. So you could take that same light, measure it through just plain clear water, and you may have half as much PAR or less. So watts per gallon, so even into the early 2000s, that was kind of the standard measurement for getting plant growth. Now that we have a wide variety of lighting types like LEDs, we know that 50 watts of T5 high output light isn't necessarily the same output as 50 watts of LED lighting. We know that reflectors make a large difference in how much of that light actually gets to your plants. We know that optics, so an LED may have like a 120-degree wide angle lens, or it may have a 60-degree narrow angle lens. So depending on the lens that's on that, or the optic that's on that LED, you may receive a lot of PAR below the light, or you may receive less PAR because that optic is actually spreading out the photosynthetically active radiation that light is throwing. Alshin, I think that was about the polleni. So Paulo cell, that's one of those people I try not to just take somebody's word for gospel, but if Dr. Loisel says something, I generally consider it to be pretty true. Anthony says, drink to test water quality. You can drink some pretty dirty water and get by.
We have a sign at the store by the window that says, "Don't drink water, fish crap in it."
Swirl and swish. There you go, C squared. That's a wine tasting.
Gross.
Fish Guy Egg, it does. So Fish Guy Egg's talking about that 3 to 5 watt of light recommendation. It's tough, and it's easy for, now that lights are a little more efficient, just using watts per gallon, it's easy for people to more or less overpower their tanks and run into just frustration and problems. Because you're Fish, what's up? Good evening. Thanks for stopping by. Danny Weshy mentioned, in terms of what most people think of clean, it means without bacteria and stuff, can't have a clean tank. That is true. At some point in time, you'll develop biofilms that you can actually see, and the bacteria are somewhat visible. Most of the time, you can't see them though. So yeah, the idea of like a clean, sterile tank is not something that's necessarily desirable. Danny says he's going to ask Steven. So where's Steven? Has been in the stream a few times. Danny, if you're talking to Steven, get Steven up in the stream. And
I haven't seen Steven in a while.
We'll make it happen. Dragon Lair tube incandescence. I've never run a tube incandescent light. Fish Nick asked PAR versus lumens. I've heard a little discussion about which is more important. Par is a far more as we care about it, a far more efficient measurement, and it actually means something to us. So lumens is kind of loosely just how much light it's throwing. It doesn't really mean a whole lot to us. Par is how much use. Well, so there's par and per, and I'm not going to get into the details because the actual difference between them is minuscule, and most people don't need to know it. But the photosynthetically active radiation. So par is how much light this light bulb, like right here, oops, is throwing that your plants or corals can use for photosynthetic activity. Lumens is just kind of it's a generic brightness. And are they loosely related? Somewhat. But definitely, if you're looking at a light, if you're looking at new lights, you want to consider par, not so much lumens. Danny heard Priscilla's cat.
Yeah, I don't know what she wants.
So, so another one, and I saw this just today in a Facebook group. Somebody that was new to keeping tanks. They said, they had their tank running for 4 or 5 months or so, and I'm gonna hold on to this one. I'll get back to you in just a second, Scott. But they were worried they were gonna leave their tank for 4 days, and like, what do I need to get to feed it? And a lot of newer people in the hobby think that if their fish don't get fed every day, that they're going to come back to a dead tank. And most fish, um, assuming that they are healthy, generally speaking, can easily go, a couple weeks without being fed by us. So unless I'm going to be gone for an extended time, meaning 2 weeks or more, I don't worry about feeding my tank. And it was unfortunate because the user was new to the hobby, and they were asking questions like, what can I do to feed them? What should I do, etc. Um, and a lot of people are saying, oh, you can get like holiday feeders and 5-day feeder blocks. All it is a bunch of food compacted so it doesn't float apart quickly. And it's got a couple binders there. But really, it's an ammonia bomb in your tank. So it's just going to sit in your tank and rot. So if your fish don't eat it right away, it's just decaying and releasing ammonia. So if you're gone for a week and you put a cheap 5-day feeder in there because you were worried about your fish, the odds of you coming back and finding, either you'll most likely find a cloudy tank, but the odds of finding dead fish is better than average. You're better off just, I said, most tanks, even fairly unhealthy tanks, a week is I wouldn't consider trying to figure out a solution unless you're going to be gone for a week or more. And then a lot of people find like, oh, well, I'm going to have so and so feed my tank. Doesn't always end well because they don't know how much to feed. Some people use like the pill boxes that are labeled like uh, for people to take several pills Sunday through Saturday, whatever. They'll portion out the food, and then whoever's watching their tank just has to feed that day. So that works out pretty well.
Yeah, we used to sell those blocks, but we kind of stopped. People don't really ask for it anymore either. I mean,
Good.
people haven't been going much places lately, so
That's good. I mean, that's kind of good to see. And 3, 2, 1.
What's up, man?
What's up, Anthony? How you doing, man?
Not bad.
So Scott from Third Coast mentioned Mulm versus no Mulm, and apparently Scott said people are hating on it. So go. Let's hear your guys' thoughts.
depends on the tank. I don't like mulm in a shrimp tank, but I don't mind it in a community tank or with bettas or something.
And I mean, what are the pros and cons, would you say, of leaving Mulm in the tank versus vacuuming it out regularly?
Well, I mean, if you have mulm, there's a chance of having nitrate build up.
Mm-hmm.
If
Could.
you all really depends on how balanced your tank is. That's why all these questions, it really all depends on the application.
Hmm.
I don't
And
like home with guppies. Guppies tend to lie on the bottom and then fin rot and yeah.
yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
that generally speaking, I'd say the myth or misconception that could be revolved around it is that it's bad for a tank. There are, some upsides to it. Um, Dragon layers, old folks.
Hi, Dave.
Because, you know, obviously there is, an opportunity for that. Mulm is just, decaying organics, whether it's some people refer to it as detritus, fish waste, decaying organics. Maybe you put Indian almond leaves in your tank. Maybe it's a planted tank and some of that stuff is breaking down as it slowly dies off. Oh, gross. Patty said mulm gives her fish water texture when she tastes it. No, no thanks. But an upside to that mulm is that it does provide a great area for micro critters to populate. So you see a lot of people that are raising fry, that can provide a bunch of little critters for your fry to feed on. Blackie's in the house. Good day,
Hello.
Dr. Black. What's cracking?
Hey, so Dragon Layer says my shrimp feed in the mold. True, they will. But, I mean, Neos are probably fine with mold. Caradinas might not be so fine with mold, really depends on the situation.
There's a lot of factors that come into play. Halo, Fins, and Flora. Hello. Howdy, howdy. Thanks for stopping by. Couple new faces tonight. If you haven't subscribed to, Anthony, Priscilla, or myself, please do so. And smash that thumbs up button. I'm not really keeping track of it tonight, but I think we're doing pretty well. And tonight, for those of you just joining in, we're kind of talking about, kind of some of the myths that flood the hobby. Deborah said that she cleans the top half inch or so of the substrate, but doesn't really go deep down.
Blackie.
Rico's out. Thanks for stopping by, Rico. We'll see you later. I know this is, a little bit later spot for some folks to jump into, so we appreciate you hanging out with us late into the evening.
Well, Rico says he's old, so.
Well, that'll happen. Dragon Layer's hanging out with us, Rico, so I don't think you have too much of an excuse. Dragon Layer hangs out most of the time.
Who's older? Probably Dragon Layer.
I think Dragon Layer. I think Dragon Layer's got Rico beat. I'm not positive, but I think it's pretty close.
Chewy also usually hangs out all night.
Holly's Haven. You can't. Holly's going and changing her username.
Oh, isn't that Holly Gibbs?
That looks like it to me, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The same picture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dragon Layer says he's 71.
Yeah, I think you got Rico beat, but maybe. So let's talk about another one, and I think this is even today, and it seems like, I thought maybe as the hobby progressed that it might slowly die off, but it doesn't seem to be. And if you ask me, the most overhyped and most talked about water parameter that nobody really needs to pay that much attention to is pH. Obviously, like, everybody always asks, like, well, what's your pH and what's my pH, and blah 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 blah, pH, and people are always trying to change their pH. I'll be honest, not that I've done a great job keeping fish for 20 years, but in the almost 20 years I've kept fish, I've never been able to attribute a fish death to pH at all, one way or the other. What's your experience with pH, Anthony?
Well, I think some of that misconception might come from people associating pH with hardness.
It could.
Like I did not long ago.
So, I know a lot of people just getting into the hobby, and I think local fish stores used to kind of plug it a little bit, would plug pH pretty hard. And obviously, if you get, you know, I'm not a huge fan of API, but if you get their master test kit, like so many people do, because it's not a great test kit, but it kind of gets you a rough idea, usually assuming you execute the test properly. Obviously comes with low range pH and high range pH. And then people get stuck on the idea that, you know, they have, so they're like, oh, well, I have angelfish. They need a low pH. My water's 8.4, whatever. How do I bring it down? And then they start adding all sorts of chemicals to try to bring their pH down. And then they're inconsistent with it and it swings. I've bred angelfish in 8.8, like liquid rock, super hard water. They don't care. There are fish, some wild caught fish might be sensitive somewhat to pH, but generally speaking, they'll survive in almost any pH. You may not see them spawn until you get them into a little more ideal, harder or softer water condition, alkaline or acidic condition. And generally that's on the more acidic sides, like your South American stuff, like your pistos may not breed until you get them into a little more acidic water. But like shell dwellers, for example, Lake Tanganyika, and generally tend to be harder water fish with higher pH, more alkaline water, into the mid 8s for sure. I have successfully spawned them in my 125 heavily planted tank with Amazonia aqua soil and running CO2. It's running straight RO water. So pH isn't a factor for most fish. And as fish guy Nick said, wild caught fish maybe not the end all be all. The amount of wild caught fish that we see in the hobby anymore is pretty low, and those wild caught fish tend to be a little more sensitive to ideal water parameters. However, most of the fish in the hobby have been, in the hobby for so long, and they're farm raised or hobbyist bred or whatever, or they hit so many different middlemen from the time they're pulled out of a wild caught collection to whoever catches them, to whoever imports them or exports them, then the importer, then the distributor, then the shop. They've gone through so many different tanks and so many different water parameters that they don't even know what pH they want anymore. So pH it can be important for spawning fish. However, definitely not a huge deal. And like Alishan said, they never monitor any water parameters, including pH. And I personally don't either. And I think that just comes with experience, more or less. But I do things that will make my water more acidic or more alkaline, but I don't test it because it's a number that's not worth chasing. Not a big deal. Patrick said 60s and 70s, 75% of fish were wild caught, and they didn't think they could adjust back then, so it was common. And yep, like I was saying, back then when more stuff was wild caught, it didn't change hands as much. It might have been a little bit of a bigger factor, but now the hobby is mainstream enough that everybody stresses pH so much, and people think that they need to hit the sweet spot for pH, but it's just not a big deal.
I never test my pH.
No. Nope. I don't test pH in freshwater. I don't test it in saltwater. I honestly, like I said, I know what I can do to make my water more acidic or more alkaline, and I know what fish I want to do that for. But generally speaking, I really only try to do that when I want to spawn the fish. So not a huge deal. And you'll see, some of the tetras people will add when people talk about adding, like peat or like Indian almond leaves, etc., to add tannins and to increase the acidity of the water to spawn stuff like apistos, tetras, Ivanacara, stuff like that. It's only to get them to spawn. Those fish are perfectly fine in the higher alkalinity. So they don't care about the pH. pHs, there's so many products. You get pH up, pH down, pH right, pH tabs, pH liquids, whatever. Quit messing with it. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone.
I mean, it all depends on where somebody lives, too.
I don't know. You can just the pH isn't the factor most of the time.
Yeah, but I mean, you use RODI water and stuff too, right?
For some tanks, I use a straight tap water for others.
I mean, if somebody lives somewhere where their tap pH is like 7.8 and they try to keep Caridina shrimp or stuff like that, it might not work. So, I mean, it does matter to a certain degree, but it doesn't matter if it's from like 7.6 or 7.2.
Right. Fishymon64 asks, so let me get this right. Can I have soft water with 8.5 pH? The answer, pH and hardness, while they're correlated, it's not like a direct relationship. You can have a more alkaline water that is softer. It just is more apt to swing. Water hardness generally higher, more alkaline water is harder, so it'll have higher GH, higher KH. But pH is just the potential for hydrogen. So you can have soft water with a higher pH. It just may swing more. Halo Fins and Flora asked, I don't know what pH is. pH is the potential of hydrogen. So more or less, so you can have, to break chemistry down, fairly simple. A water molecule can have a positive charge because it has it could be positive ion, negative ion, based on the amount of hydrogen. More or less, we'll call it protons for the sake of simplicity, I guess. It's more or less the acidity, so how acidic or alkaline the water is, so basic. So obviously your acids like your hydrochloric, sulfuric, etc., generally tend to cause a little more corrosion and stuff. Your bases, kind of the other way. It's not very good topic for a live stream because it can get intense. And one of these days I'll put a presentation together in a slideshow and we'll actually get into it. If you're interested, Jason from Redfish Bluefish, give me a minute, actually just did a pretty good video about it. Let me see if I can find it, and that'll give you guys something to get going on.
It's
if you're really interested. It's a tough one, so I'll post that.
I was just gonna say about saltwater alkalinity, but I was like, no, that's taking it too far.
It's one of those weird ones. So check out this video in the link. I listened to this the other day while I was at the gym, and it gets you going pretty well.
Gets you going at the gym?
Dragonlair up here mentioned that there's some fish who eggs won't hatch in hard water, but the pH isn't much of a factor in that. Spot on. There's also, so some fish such as the rummy nose tetra, where if you keep them in harder water, pH irrelevant. If you keep them in harder water, their eggs will calcify before they even spawn, so they're more or less sterile. Alishan said soda cichlids will spawn in pH in the 7s. Yep, that's how little pH matters. Soda cichlids come from very alkaline water. I think up in the 9s even. Hot. They like hot alkaline water up in the 9s, and for them to spawn in the 7s kind of gives you an idea of how little pH really matters for most fish.
My betta
Uh,
spawned in tap water too. My wild betta spawned in my tap water. That's like
yeah.
7.4.
And that was the thing with discus for a long time too. Um, so making since KH affects the pH, it might tell you what your KH is, sort of. But long term, as hobbyists, I honestly don't know how lifespan, stress, internal health are if living in high pH. I don't know. I I think we've been keeping most fish around, and this is like a couple people mentioned that they're domesticated to the point that they've adapted to live quite well in water that's far from their natural habitat.
I think Patty broke her computer.
Uh-oh.
She must have been
Um,
on side she isn't supposed to be on.
so I know Danny was helping Tony Danford with a question up here. Let me see if I can go back and find it. I saw it and I got cut up in something else. So Tony said, I've been in the hobby a year and I'm up to 5 tanks. Question, how does an established tank crash?
Do you want to talk about old tank syndrome?
That's a stream. That's a full lecture in itself.
Yeah, that's another topic.
But I'm gonna pitch this question to you for just a second here.
What? What was the question? How does an established tank crash? Well, there could be a lot of things why an established tank crashes. The balance changes. Maybe feed too much. Maybe medication. I mean, the question has to be asked a little more specific. Like with what kind of tank was it? What's in there? How big is it? Kind of filter, everything.
And Danny kind of touched on some of the things just over time. Like he said, he mentioned nutrient imbalance. He mentioned, and this is why I'm more of a proponent of frequent, larger water changes, depending on what's in the tank. But some people don't do frequent water changes, and that this allows, or they don't do large water changes, and it allows certain compounds that we don't test for to build up in the aquarium, and over time that can become problematic. So
Yeah,
there are.
in saltwater tanks, a lot of people, before they do a water change, they actually go and stir their substrate
Mm-hmm.
just to get all the anaerobic stuff out of there. But it's not. I'm not saying go and do that. Never mind, scratch that, because that can cause some disaster.
Yeah. So Tony, there's a lot to it, really. But I'm a proponent of frequent water changes, meaning multiple times a month. Some people are like, oh, I'll only do water change once every 6 months or whatever. Some people are like, I never do a water change. Well, eventually, either the compounds that you're not testing for are going to build up in your tank to a point where they become toxic and something goes south, or you will do a water change, and your water change, like your water in your tank. So if you do a water change once a week, right? It's like I personally do roughly 50% a week on most of my tanks. So even as if we'll assume I just use straight tap water, as my tap water changes, because obviously your city treatment plant, whether they get their water from a spring, from a reservoir, as it rains, whatever, your tap water is generally slightly changing in its contents. So the chemistry of your tap water that you're using for your water changes is changes over time. So if I do 50% weekly, my tank water will change with my tap water at a reasonable, usually slow rate, barring anything drastic at the water treatment facility. If you change your water once every 6 months, the water in your tank will age. So because of decaying organics and etc., it will become more acidic. Just as things break down, etc., it will become more acidic. And then take into account the fact that maybe your city water changes, over 6 months of time. When you finally do a water change after 6 months, if you do that same 50%, you are drastic. You could potentially be drastically changing your water chemistry real fast all at once. And that's when you could definitely see, an established tank crash.
Yeah, like where I live, I have 4 seasons, so my tap water changes from season to season.
Hmm. And yeah, so there's definitely, um, I think generally you see when people get old tank syndrome, it's from, you know, they seem to be the type of people that don't do, the larger water changes, the frequent water changes, etc.
The people that don't do maintenance. That's what.
and there's certain, I'm not I'm not going to call it, there are some names in the hobby, that advocate for a little more old school minded types of fish keeping, that are not signed from like a biochemical point of view. They're not very sound. So, and they're like, well, I've done this for 30 years and got away with it. I was like, that doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, but if you've done it for 30 years and it worked, then it must be right.
Does it though? I mean, working is relative. Some of us have higher standards.
Right.
Well, that's better than the people that have tried something for a month and say it works.
Right. Just because you do something wrong for 30 years doesn't mean that whatever you're doing is right.
Yeah.
Riley said, remember, lots of freshwater fish sit in isolated bodies of water with constantly changing water chemistry until the rainy season, and that rain causes a huge change in water chemistry very fast. It does. Um, and um, you know, that's something that there are a lot of variables too. But you also have to consider, we often compare what's happening in our tanks to what's happening in the wild. Our tank, even if you have a tiny fish in a gigantic tank, we'll say you keep, a dozen neon tetras in a 500-gallon tank, it's still a closed system. Like nature is an open system with constant, input and output and exchange of various, obviously like water, but different compounds, and there's a lot more activity going on, than our tiny little glass boxes. Um, so some of the theories that, if you guys are familiar with Diana Wallstad's book Ecology of the Planted Aquarium, um, which I have my own opinion about that I won't share tonight, she attempts to compare things that might happen in a natural environment to what she tried to make happen in an aquarium, which is a closed system.
Hey, Geekboy says he has 0 standards.
And that's fine, Geek Boy. Somebody has to have no standards.
Oh, by the way, Geekboy, I got in a couple hundred coolie loaches. Make sure you go in on Saturday at 2 p.m. and buy some.
Saturday at 2, is that? What's Saturday at 2?
It's gonna be the busiest time of the day. Plus, I'm not there.
Oh, Coolie Loach Rodeo.
Yeah, so make the owner catch the coolie loaches. Thank you.
So Tony said, so as long as you do weekly or biweekly water changes, the old tank syndrome shouldn't be an issue for the most part. I'm not saying it won't be. I'm saying, in my experience, and based on the information that I know, my experiences, my practices, it shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, there are a lot of variables. There's a ton of variables out there. I recommend people. You don't have, like, I personally do weekly water changes. I usually do at least 50% a week. Unless it's like a shrimp tank, then I'll do like 10% a month or something. But that's different reasons. Find a routine or a schedule that is easy for you to be consistent with. Consistency, whether it's once a week or once a month, I would say consistency is key. Mickey M said, if buying wild fish from soft water, I'll always try to achieve the same in my tanks, but to check transport water and or check with wholesalers for info is basic. Fish may already be used to their water. Yeah. So if you look at a lot of like, even if you look at like, I think Seriously Fish, which is a a pretty good resource for information. A lot of the times they'll list like a pH range, um, and, and that might be, so you look at water conditions. Let me share the screen here so we're all looking at the same thing.
Can I say something to transport water?
No, go ahead.
So if I know some people with shrimp especially, they try to test the TDS in the bag water, but since the bag was closed for an X amount of time and you open it and oxygen hits the surface and ammonia starts building up, that TDS is not the same as it was, or the pH, or whatever you test for nitrate. It's not the same as it was out of the original tank where the livestock came from. So don't try to like match your bag water.
Right. So going back to, like Seriously Fish, it's pretty good resource that I use to reference a lot for information on different species. Like they list water conditions, like you'll see down here, pH 4.0 to 7.5. Well, I mean, is that the pH range that they're found in the wild? Most likely. Is that the pH range that they need to be kept in your tank to thrive or to spawn? Not necessarily. So it's there, and like you said, Mickey, it's a lot of the times even wild caught fish have been transferred from the wild habitat to the collector, to some quarantine, to an exporter, transshipper, importer, wholesaler, distributor, shop that they very well could be used to whatever water. So
Ooh, I got in some cardinal tetras a couple days
oh,
ago,
did you? Are they
and
healthy?
no, their water was awful. They all have Gilbert now.
Halo Fins and Flora said Wallstat exposed on the next stream. You want to get me? That's there's a couple topics that some people can try to push that'll get me a little fired up, and that's Wallstat method tanks. Oh man, another night. Let's not get going on that one for tonight.
I had
You guys,
actually somebody ask me about that today at the store.
tell them no. Just say no.
No, they asked me if one of the display tanks we have is a Wallstat tank.
Mm-mm.
I was like, no.
No, just don't go there.
Here, can I send you this picture, Mike, and you can share it?
Yeah. I will say, just, and this is I'm going to drop the Wallstat for the rest of the night. But if the Wallstat method and what happened or tried to happen in her book was, effective at any level and a quality way of keeping stuff, then her book would have more pictures. That's it. That's all I'll say. Oh, holy smokes. Wow. All right. So when people so a lot of fish shops may not have the space, time, or resources to quarantine fish when they get them. So they may be like, oh, well, this shop has dead fish. No, it's not always the shop's fault, because sometimes something happens, like
Yeah, so I had about 300 cardinal tetras. 12 hours later, I was 50 cardinals down. And they all have red gills and bacterial infection setting in and all that stuff. I don't know if you can blow it up, but you can actually see the gilbert on the.
yeah, that's brutal.
On the
So yeah, that's straight from, and you don't have to, obviously don't call out the wholesaler, distributor, wherever they came from, but
yeah, that's why I put that red thing over the tank.
but just understand uh, that sometimes Danny commented on Wallstat stuff. I won't go into that tonight. That's a good discussion that we can have. Not one for right now though. So I'm not trying to stiff arm you, Danny. It's something I'm definitely open to talking to talk to about. Um, but we can talk about that one another night if you're interested. That'd be a stream in itself.
And I know if I go in tomorrow, there's gonna be another 30 to 50 Cardinals down,
Probably.
just because the water wasn't good.
So Tony Answered asked, I've listened to other YouTube people that say that people do too many water changes and you should pay more attention to the 40 parts per million of nitrites. So they do mean nitrates, yep, then do a water change. Honestly, 40 parts per million nitrates for 95% of fish out there is nothing. Like 40 ppm nitrates is not a lethal level at all. Like for nitrates to be lethal for most fish, you have to be in the hundreds, like hundreds.
And it's more of a long term thing too.
Yeah, it's got to be like a chronic high nitrate issue.
Yeah.
Just and I talked about we did a live stream on this about water changes. We talked about when we do water changes, why we do water changes, what we're looking for. Some people only do water changes when their nitrates are above whatever that person's threshold is. So if this person's threshold is 40 ppm nitrates, they test the water once a week. They don't do a water change until it's 40. Okay, sure, whatever. But going back to what I said in that other stream and a couple times that I mentioned tonight, there are a lot of factors inside your tank that drive a water change that we don't necessarily test for. Most people aren't testing for phosphates or sulfates or heavy metal levels. Like, copper can be detrimental to a tank. We're not testing for copper. Your copper levels are slowly building up, but that's not something you test for. So there are a lot of things in your water, such as, like I said, hormones that you can't test for those hormone levels and that are released by fish that could be detrimental to the fish's growth, etc. But it's definitely something that you want to remove from that water. So some people do preach fewer water changes. I don't necessarily preach fewer water changes. I preach consistency, and I do suggest doing more water changes more often. However, don't try to do water changes once a week if your schedule is not going to allow that, because then you're going to be inconsistent. You're not going to enjoy your tanks. Like I do 50% a week. I've got, right now I don't have that many tanks but before I tore them down, I had 30 tanks. I was able to change 50% on 30 tanks in an hour. But I enjoy doing that on my tanks. Some people dread water changes. If you dread water changes and you're trying to do water changes a ton because you think I'm telling you to do them once a week, you're going to quickly learn to, associate the hobby with work. You're not going to enjoy it, and then you're just going to want to get out, and that's not what I'm trying to do at all.
Tell me about it.
So
I got paid to do water changes, so I try to not do water changes at home.
Mickey M, my experience with water change effect is widely different. If comparing and using hard or soft water, large water changes with soft water can often kickstart ick. I bet it's not the same risk with hard water. I've never had that issue, I suppose. I'm not sure what would cause an ick outbreak by using changes with soft water. If I had to guess, I would say that your fish, if your fish are, are used to being in harder water, and you do a large water change with very soft water, obviously that does change that fish's ability to osmoregulate, which could induce stress upon the fish. At what point in time, a stressed fish is more prone to ick, actually, displaying itself and actually causing symptoms. So that would be my 2 cents on that one as to how that might happen. Like if your fish aren't used to soft water, and then you're hitting them with soft water, there could be a stress induced by a change in the fish's ability to osmoregulate. Gloria's still trying to get me going. Not gonna bite that one tonight. I don't. I just don't have the time. Don't have the time. Tony Danford, always happy to help. Holly's Haven has her book. Appreciate her knowledge along with many others. As a planted tank hobbyist, I have her book. I've read her book. There's a lot. It's her book's a part of planted tank history, and people have learned, whether it's directly or indirectly, from it, and the hobby has advanced from it. However, the book has little practicality or little to offer for, I'd say, 90% of planted tank hobbyists, to be honest. It does contain a lot of misinformation. It contains a lot of poor techniques, and I'll leave that alone for now. Fish Guy Nick asked, if you're not seeing high level or any levels of nitrates, can you scale back your water changes to monthly or so? Again, that goes back to a lot more driving a water change than just nitrates. So I feel like I touched on that one. Question for Priscilla, or comment, I suppose. Holly said, my local shop really let me down today. They had baby axolotl in cups like a betta. I'm not an axolotl keeper, but I feel like that would,
No,
obviously
actually,
less than
but
desirable.
axolotls, especially if they're little like that, they will actually take each other's limbs off.
Really?
Yeah, so we have kept axolotls in large cups before too, like the 16-ounce cups. But I mean, of course, if the water's dirty, then that's definitely the store's fault.
Yeah. Danny said he does a water change when my tanks need them, and they all have their own way of telling me they need one. Yep. So I personally, like I said, I have stick to more or less a weekly regime. And that just lets me keep water parameters consistent in my tanks and stay ahead of everything. Question. Mickey M. Question for a future stream. Wallstad water compared to Father Fish water being used when acting on their setups. I'll write that down. I'll make a note. And if you guys want to go there, I'll go there. I mean, I have no problem doing it, but
sounds great. I'll be in the chat for that one.
I mean, if you want, I mean, that might be. I wonder. I bet I could get somebody like, maybe I might have to lure him in with some cash or something. But I bet Tom Barr would be interested maybe in having a chat about that one.
Tom Barr would be a good one to have a chat about.
So if you guys want to talk about it, we can talk about it. Yeah, I'll play nice for tonight. There's a Alishan said 60 to 80% every other week, more often with fry tanks. Yep. I'm about the same, at least 50% on most tanks. Obviously fry tanks they're generally overcrowded, generally getting more food, so more often or more frequent water changes. Keep that water clean, keep it consistent. Don't match temperatures. I generally don't match temperatures super close. A lot of people, and that's another misconception that we can touch on, is they're like, oh, I do a water change, but I like try to shack like the temperature change. Like I make sure if my tank is 76 degrees that my water change water is 76 degrees. Most fish aren't as sensitive as we like to make them out to be. And And a change in 2 degrees isn't going to nuke your fish tank. I'm not saying do a 50% water change with 50-degree water when your tank is normally at 85. But yeah, and a lot of times that cooler water change, especially with fish, from the Amazon, etc., that cold water simulates kind of the rainy season, going into spring, glaciers melting, snow coming off the mountaintops, etc. And that cold water will often trigger fish to spawn. Ian said he just finished some carts and heading to a hotel. What's up, Ian? Thanks for stopping in. So Mickey said, salt, 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 used a lot in the trade. What is the salt content in water prep products?
In water
So
products?
I'm not sure where that question's going.
In like water conditioning?
I think so.
There shouldn't be
Mickey,
any salt in there.
Mickey, if you can just specify where you're kind of going with that question.
There's salt in medication.
Yeah, we can talk about that one. I'm just not sure. I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. I'm not saying your question doesn't make sense. I just want to make sure that I understand it based on verbiage, in order to attempt to get my 2 cents on it. But salt, what's your opinion on using salt in freshwater tanks, Priscilla, and Anthony for that matter?
I don't use salt unless I need to. Like in terms of need to, when a fish has a scrape or whatever to help repair its slime coat or medication. But other than that, I don't add salt to my tanks. Because I don't think it's needed, really.
Do you use salt for much other than your reef, Anthony?
I rarely use salt. Even if a fish has scrapes, I'll go with a stress coat before I go with salt.
I think a lot of people just generally oh, I add aquarium salt with all my water changes. Yeah, again, is it hurting anything? Probably not. Is it doing anything beneficial? Maybe, maybe not. Is it, worth using? I think it's not necessary. I'm on the side that rarely uses salt, even if I have a lot of people use salt for ick. I personally don't, largely because I have planted tanks, but I think salt changes the water parameters of your tank quite a bit. So I don't use salt for ick. I usually use Icex is a pretty good generic off the shelf treatment, I think. Fritz has a pretty good, what is theirs? Not Expel.
Fix-Ic.
Yep. So I haven't used Fritz, but it seems like
it's purple.
and it's sold out. But I'll usually for ick, 9 times out of 10, I will personally just use. I'll raise the temperature, and it works just fine.
It's purple. It works.
So I don't use salt much. Maybe Mickey clarify that question. I'll keep scrolling through the chat, and we will see.
Oh yeah, so salt. I mean, I do use it if I have things like guppies or mollies or platies that do come from overseas where they use salt water to raise them.
Right. Yep. And that's a good point right there. Is that a lot of farms actually they cheat and they use salt water because it's cheaper. Halo fins and Florus, their fish get crazy happy after cool water change. And you'll notice that's you'll often notice like when I do cool water changes, like on my 125, you guys have seen the Chalathrian and Alani rainbow fish in there. They'll often come over towards the hose and then they'll swim around in the cool water. I'm trying to see. Mickey and Danny are talking about water hardness in Florida. I'm not sure who they're talking about. I'm gonna see if I can find it quick. Because they're talking plants, obviously. Oh, father fish.
I think Mickey M meant like stress code.
For the salt question.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know what kind of salt content stress coat has. Do you?
I don't think it has any salt content. It has aloe vera.
Yep. I think it uses similar methods.
I just listened to an API guy for like an hour about stuff, and I already forgot what he said. Oh, speaking of something, like I don't know if I can share that on here. Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe. Is it? Do you have like a non-disclosure agreement or what?
Possibly. I talked to somebody today that works at Aquarium,
Okay.
and everybody that wants to set up a fish room and needs cheap Aquarium tanks that are $1 per gallon, better hurry up. That might not last forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I can say.
So.
But wait till I go buy all the tanks I need.
I'm just saying, don't think this thing is gonna go on for the end of eternity.
So Ian mentioned zero nitrates in an established tank is impossible. The API master test kit doesn't test that low, so it reads 0. You know what API stands for, though, right? Always potentially inaccurate, because those tests, they might get you close, but the nitrate test particularly is, I don't trust it a whole lot. Dragon Layer said every time it rains in the Amazon, the water temps drop from mid-80s to 70 in a matter of hours, which is, if you think about it, that's insane. Like, such a large volume of water is insane. And people think about, so let's think about the habitats that a lot of our fish come from. It's a lot of smaller bodies of water, shallow water. So even if you have, like, you set up your kid's swimming pool, right? Well, obviously it's a smaller volume, but it's more the depth that we're concerned about. Because it's such a shallow volume of water, that swimming pool from overnight to like the middle of the day, the temperature can change, 10, 15 degrees easy. So even in the wild, in these small streams or ponds, etc., our fish are moving from the deeper water where it's fairly cold up into the shallows where the water fluctuates a lot. So trying to shack the temperature and isn't a big deal. And people worry about temperature fluctuations. Like it's natural for the most part. Very few bodies of water have super consistent temperatures. Like we keep, obviously most people keep heaters in their tanks. Like, okay, my tank is 78 degrees year round. Well, I've been talking to some people that suggest maybe that's not, obviously it's not the most natural, and it might not be the best for the fish either. Like those higher temps, I tend to keep my fish a little on the cooler side. Some people like to keep theirs warmer. Warmer will cause them to grow faster. It'll also cause them, like if you're constantly keeping a fish up at 84 degrees, will it grow faster? Yes. Is it going to speed up its metabolism? Yes. Is it going to shorten its lifespan? Also, yes. So I tend to keep my fish a little bit cooler than most people.
Oh, so apparently it's not like it's already been announced, but that $1 per gallon sale is going to end for good.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. Just wait. Now that he's not selling plants straight from his tanks, he'll be setting them up more. Yeah, Danny, that kind of goes with the Wallstad thing. That's a discussion for another time. Different style of keeping tanks. I don't know. It's for a different type of person. I don't mean to. I'm not here to like talk bad on anybody or anything. So just there are different methods and styles of keeping tanks, and I think depending on your goals, find something that interests you and works for you. But pictures and videos speak volumes. Mickey said, I refer to water products used when water changing. I never use it. Oh, okay. Yep. So just like we were talking, adding salt when you do water changes and stuff. So
I
I
wouldn't
think
do it
we
every water change. It's not needed every water change.
right. So Riley said, my opinion, when fish die for insignificant reasons like small temp changes, pH, etc., they probably had poor genetics to begin with and were living on borrowed time. Um, yeah, and we see that a lot, unfortunately. Fish farms are trying to pump out so many fish, and the less responsible breeders are pumping out some fish with poor genetics, and you see fish that are, um, they're just not healthy to begin with, so they are more susceptible to illness and premature death, and more susceptible to stress and displaying symptoms of problems, especially when you get into short-bodied type fish or balloon type fish, um, where there's been whether it's generally the cause of a deformity or a mutation, but then that is inbred to try to reproduce that trait. There's so much inbreeding that goes on that you just end up with unhealthy livestock that has poor immune systems, and can't fight off things that most fish wouldn't have a problem with.
Do you ever see balloon rams?
Yes, not a fan.
They look funny.
Balloon, short body, you name it, not a fan. Ian said he's going to set up a 10-gallon saltwater goby and shrimp tank. I want to try some cool looking algae but I have no idea if it's easy or possible with that combo. Definitely possible. I've used a few different macroalgae such as Cheetomorpha and Caulerpa. There are a couple species of Caulerpa. Pretty easy to keep, really. Not too tough. I haven't got into some of the cooler species, but if you look around, I think I've told you about this before.
Oh, there's so much awesome saltwater algae. Look, Ian, look up dragon's breath algae.
Let me see. There's a specific tank that comes to mind. I don't know. Let me see if I can share this page with you guys quick. Share. Boom. So this is obviously it's a seagrass tank, but it consists of several types of macroalgae.
Oh, it's my buddy's website.
Reef Builders Reef Builders is awesome. I use Reef Builders stuff all the time.
Jake Adams lives in
Yep.
Denver.
And it's not cooperating at the moment. There we go. But these are all macroalgae and a firefish. This is an older tank. I doubt this tank is still set up anymore, but this is something that I want to do one of these days. You see obviously different leaf shapes. I use that term roughly. Sea cucumbers in there. Pretty cool. Gives you an idea. Look at this bright. I don't know what this bright red stuff is. Is that the dragon's breath? It might be. I'm not sure.
No.
Just cool stuff. Shrimp in there. A couple toadstools. But pretty neat, really. So yeah, it's not super hard. I would say the hardest part about keeping those macroalgae with a shrimp and goby is just sourcing them, because they're not necessarily super easy to find.
Yeah, I thought about filling out my 90-gallon with some algae until I took it down.
And a lot of people, they'll have their display set up as a reef, and then like their refugium or their sump, they'll shove a bunch of macroalgae in for nutrient export. Tony said, thanks for your time and help. Try to catch your next live stream. Have a good night, Tony. Looks like you bailed out a couple minutes ago. I got off on a tangent. I hope this was helpful to you. Again, I try to make it clear what I feel is my opinion versus, actually, supportable information.
Wait, we get to have opinions?
No, you don't.
I figured.
This is my show. Only I get an opinion.
All right. Give it 10 seconds and Patty will have an opinion to that.
Alishan asked you a question there, Priscilla.
Yeah, what? Oh, yeah, I answered her already.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't pay attention to what you say in chat.
Well, of course you don't.
I don't pay attention to what you actually say.
In general, right?
Oh,
Thanks for being such a good friend.
I do what I can.
All right, man. I'm gonna hop off here because I'm starving and like zoning out. So yeah, I need food.
Sounds good. Thanks for stopping by, Anthony.
Later, bro.
Have a good night.
Good.
Ian's doing some research on critters he wants to keep in saltwater with cool-looking algae if possible. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that would work. Priscilla would probably know more because she's just a little more familiar with, saltwater stuff.
Red ogle algae.
Red ogle algae?
Sea lettuce. There's so much cool saltwater algae, actually. Dragon's breath is my favorite, though.
So that's Gracilaria, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do some Google foo here.
It's pretty cool. I got some.
Yeah. Oh, you can get it. It's only $50 for a 1-inch frag on Amazon.
I can send you some.
So, yeah. So don't buy. Okay, I'm not saying don't. I don't recommend buying anything that's alive on Amazon.
Yeah. Well, is it independent sellers?
But they are, but it's not a good environment for livestock. Thomas Dobbins is here. Hey, Thomas. Thanks for stopping by. I don't think Priscilla's painting anything tonight. You're not.
Are you painting anything?
No. You know I don't do art. Tom said he's fishing a new rack for 36 10-gallon tanks. That's impressive. And we mentioned this earlier in the stream. But lumber prices suck right now. They are bad. For those of you that are interested, Thomas Dobbins he puts out some pretty cool stuff on YouTube. So check his channel out. I dropped that down in the chat there. He said he's putting out a video of his 10-gallon tank racks. So that'd be pretty cool. 18 tanks. My substrate varies depending on fish and plant needs, but I have the best luck with dirted. Do what works for you. I'll say I have my opinion on different methods. And do what works out for you. Dragon Lair and Riley both said not a fan of balloon fish. Neither am I. Deborah mentioned glow bettas, which I have seen a glow betta in person. Also not a fan. There are some amazing. I'm not big into like the domestic type betta. There are some super cool ones out there. I'm not generally a fan though.
Here's the dragon's breath. Oh.
Yeah, it's super cool.
See how? Oh, you can't see the price. It's $70. I need to start selling saltwater algae.
You should.
That's it.
The Reef Robber is here from Oregon. Howdy, howdy. Welcome to the exchange. Casual Aquatics. Hello. C Squared from the 603. Thanks for stopping in from Massachusetts. We got a couple mass holes in here tonight. Ian said glow bettas for some reason really interest me. All the others I don't care about. Wouldn't mind a glow betta. So actually, Jesse's not here, but I think Jesse has some glow bettas that George bred. Aqua balls. George, if you're still here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he said that you had raised some up and sent him some. Ian wants some of the dragon's breath, so if you could hook Ian up, he'd
I got
appreciate
you.
it. Oh, he works at a fish store too. I forgot that. I don't
Which
remember the
fish
name of the. I don't remember the name of the store you work at.
Wet spot? I hope it's the wet spot.
Does I know one person that used to work there, maybe. Patty said she read that glows are not as long lived. I'm not personally sure about that. I know it's more of
No fish.
a genetic variation with some help, but I'm not sure about the lifespan.
They're produced by Seagrass Farms.
Bobetas are.
Yeah.
Is that something that they do themselves, or
Well, Seagrass Farms has the patent for glowfish.
okay?
They're the only ones that are allowed to or can make it and sell it.
Do you remember tattooed mollies?
Oh yeah, there's tattooed parrotfish, by the way.
Oh, I know. I'm aware. How terrible of a trend was that?
Yeah, it's a trend, unfortunately, overseas still.
Is it?
Yeah, to have like a parrotfish with a little heart on the side or something.
Yeah,
Like
because they had like the tattooed fish, and then they did the painted glass tetras for a while,
that. Yeah,
which I haven't seen any of those for a while.
it doesn't. Luckily, it didn't catch on here in the states, but like
Mhm.
China and whatnot, crazy.
Right. S asked if mantis shrimp would eat that dragon's breath algae.
He won't eat it, but he will take it and shove it in a hole. So
Do you have it? Do you have it in your little cube with your mantis shrimp?
Oh, what?
Your cube that you have your mantis shrimp in? Do you have any dragon's breath in there?
No.
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 I didn't think so, but
I used to have dragon's breath in there till he like
tore it
shoved
apart.
it in a hole in a dark corner where I couldn't get it out.
So Fishymon64 is propositioning you.
What? I'm not free on Saturday night. I'm actually
Just
hang
just a
out with
stream.
my
Just-
boyfriend. What kind of
Just a
question is that?
stream. Holly said her brother's building a wood shop and has offered to do some custom racks. There you go. I enjoy doing word work, so I build my own stuff. But if you have somebody willing to do it for you, hit them up. It can be a pain. It can definitely be a pain. Uh-oh, look who we got creeping in here. The one and only.
That guy owes me moss.
That guy, Dansley.
Yeah, that guy. I'm just gonna call him that guy until he sends me moss.
Mickey M. Only people I've heard breeding low pH fish in the U.S. is them using RO, rainwater, soft water, and combo with tannins and peat. So pH, KH matters in those species. By the way, Cockatoides is not a low pH fish. Wild, I would say wild caught tend to be a little more, but we talked about that. But yeah, RO, you got to get some clean water in there that is malleable, if you will, that you can adjust with peat. If you want to talk about softening water up, check out, like, find a Killie club. Killie guys got that stuff figured out. They got it dialed in, man. So Ian said it's not the wet spot. All Things Aquariums, which I'm not familiar with. All Things Aquariums. I think it's up in Oregon, right?
It's almost like all things fish.
Sounds like it. Don't confuse us, though. Not the same. I wish I had the budget. I wish I had the budget to have people work under me. Showed up around. Is that still a thing? I thought they stopped.
I haven't seen it. And like,
Anthony said they still sell painted tetras.
where?
I don't know.
Actually, I take it back. I think I saw it on the wholesalers list.
Huh. Because they have, I mean, I've seen like, because the painted one, where it's just like the line down the back is not, I mean, that's a different method of development than the actual like glow tetra. I think it's the same species,
You mean
just a different
this?
coloration method. Yeah.
Yeah. Still around?
Halo said they saw tattooed parrotfish last week. I haven't seen one in a while, thankfully. And Alshan said they saw him in Pennsylvania. Is Death by Dying? Is that still a website? Do you remember that? I don't know if it's still around anymore. It used to be deathbydying.org. Used to be a web. Yeah, it's still a thing. I haven't like looked at it in a while. I thought it kind of fell off the planet. It's kind of a group kind of designated out there to try to stop like dying fish and tattooing fish, but painted glass fish, gold dollars, blueberry, strawberry, painted tetras, painted, injected, dipped, injected. Yeah, all kinds of. It's unfortunate, but there's all kinds of fish that they, you know, manipulate in an unfortunate fashion. Deathbydying.org if you're interested.
So ugly.
What's that?
The tattooed parrotfish look ugly.
I mean, I don't like parrotfish to begin with, but
Yeah, that's another topic.
that's more of a matter of opinion. Mickey's a member. Oh, you're a Killy person anyway. Then you know, you get it. So I went to the. If you're not familiar with Killies, people are always like, "Oh, like saltwater is so cool because of the colors." Check out Killifish. You need way less space and you get all the same colors. Harder to find just because they're not as popular. But I went to a Killie show. I went to the Waco show, so the Wisconsin Area Killifish Organization show a few years ago. Some awesome stuff there. Pretty sweet. Halo said in Ontario there's a black market for fish. Frowned upon fish. Interesting. I mean, I guess, well, God, what was it? Last year or 2 years ago, somebody got busted with, I want to say, a bunch of stingrays that they shipped in. And the stingrays were like confiscated. And I think they had to kill them all.
Yeah.
Dude, do you know what I'm talking about? There's like a huge bust.
Yeah, I heard that.
So.
Same as 3 months ago, a bunch of poachers got caught in Hawaii with way too many yellow tangs.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's nothing being exported out of Hawaii anymore.
Yeah.
So
Deborah said she doesn't care for frankenfish. That kind of gets into, we can maybe one night we'll talk about hybrid fish, because some of that stuff can be an interesting topic to debate about. Fish shop that got slapped with a $40,000 fine for arrows. Yeah, there's.
Did I tell you? The police showed up for moss balls.
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody's seen it by now. But zebra mussels were found in whatever the main farm is that produces this little algae balls. Call them what you want. They're algae balls. Apparently, they found an abundance of zebra mussels, which are extremely invasive. So the police are out confiscating moss balls.
So there's a farm in Florida that sells plants to all the fish stores in the country. All the same plants, the ones you buy. And if you buy it from Florida, you would think, oh, hey, that stuff comes from the United States. But turns out that farm in Florida buys mossballs from an Asian country to sell it here.
Mm-hmm.
And the last 60 days, the mossballs they bought contained those zebra mussels. So, and it's a huge problem. So law enforcement showing up pretty much basically in every fish store that has ordered from that farm. And they were pretty serious about it. It was like 2 guys over 6 foot tall with badges in a black truck. So, it was different.
So S asked, how do you even make a ball of algae? So they're often marketed as Marimo moss balls. It's actually, I believe, a species of, I think it's technically Cladophora algae. And they basically, they take a chunk of algae and tumble it more or less so that it grows evenly in a round circle. But if you stop tumbling it, it'll just kind of go everywhere if it continues to live. From what I've seen, I personally put a reasonable amount of effort to keep algae out of my tanks, so I have no interest in intentionally introducing it. But some people find them decorative.
Yeah, I mean it's cute in a little beta tank or something, for kids. Kids have fun too with the hobby.
So Mickey said, did you see the guy in Spain or Italy a year ago during COVID? Only people allowed to go out was walking their pets, and he took his goldfish bowl out for a walk.
Yeah, that's pretty good though.
I mean, do you just put it, like on a skateboard and push it, or in like a stroller, or what? What's the story there?
Hold it, walk down the road with it.
I can see, like, if you had like a lobster or something, you could put like the lobster on a leash and let it wander around maybe. But so we're right about the top of the hour. We're getting close. Let's see what we got for time here. Do you guys have any other like myths or misconceptions or ideas that people seem to have that you either find are absurd, or maybe you've heard something and think that what, maybe that's not quite accurate? Could I get some clarification on? If you guys have anything else, I'll gladly answer it. Otherwise, we're just about at the 2-hour point, and we will probably shutter down for the evening. So once again, I will not be streaming next week. I'll be on vacation down in Florida, enjoying the weather. Priscilla, you are not streaming Saturday.
Nope, but Pam might go an hour early.
So I think Pam. So Pam over at Punchy Paints may go a little early Saturday, so check her out. Otherwise, I will see if anybody wants my Tuesday evening spot. I used to live in Florida. I lived in Panama City for a couple years when I was younger.
Are you gonna retire in Florida?
I don't know. We'll see. So if any of you guys, like, I don't know, I don't think anybody in the chat usually streams too much. Anthony's here, but he usually goes later at night, later in the week. So we'll see if somebody wants a spot, and if I can find somebody to fill it, I'll post up on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure you guys know what's going on. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by tonight. I appreciate it. The lurkers, the chatters. Halo wants me to grow a mustache back. Not likely, but maybe. If you're catching the replay, thanks for sticking around for all 2 hours of it. hopefully you guys feel like you're getting something productive out of this. You know, there's a sufficient amount of just hangout chat, you know, streams out there, and I'm trying to make sure this is informational, or at least if it's not informational, it's a significant and relevant discussion of ideas where people can swap some ideas back and forth. So if you feel that way, please just kind of give me some feedback. Drop me an email, mike.allthingsfish@gmail.com, or leave a comment on one of the videos. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. Let me know what you want to see next time. But until then, I'm going to post a couple more videos this week. I'll see if I can upload some videos next week. Maybe I'll get ahead on some content, give you guys something to watch next week. Otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Priscilla, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And thanks for stopping by. So have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.